Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo, bringing you another video talking about Star Trek Online. And in today's video, after a little bit of a break, I'm going to be doing and talking about bridge officer traits in both space and ground. I haven't seen any big video talking about all of these, so I'm going to talk about it today. A lot of it is because I've been working pretty hard on the Star Trek Online lore. It's not really a roadblock, it's just something I didn't realize was going to take a ton of time, so I'll do a quick update as to why it's taking so long. And I'll go through this video in terms of biases and assumptions, dealing with how I'm going to be ranking all of these traits. And then I'll go over first the ground traits and then the space ones. And then go with some examples in game of some decent bridge officers, and then an example strong group for ground combat for both free to play as well as what I personally feel based upon my preferences for ground combat as to what would be the strongest in slot for every single one of those inside the game. Feel free to see the description for all those time links. We have over 60 slides that we're going over today, so it's going to be a long video. I'm going to try my best to make it as quick as possible. Just for general housekeeping here, for the Star Trek Online lore stuff that I'm doing right now, I've already done my general outline for the whole Star Trek Online lore. I've done distance calculations and time calculations for all the canonical Star Trek locations in the game. I've already done all that. What's taking a long time is figuring out where all the Star Trek Online locations are. Because since a lot of the places in the game aren't entirely consistent as to how we see it inside of the in-game map, it's a little bit difficult for me figuring out which sections of the little cubes inside of the maps of where to actually put their Star Trek locations to be able to make a reliable distance for all the different things that's going on inside the game. I'm doing what I can to make it work, but to do it right, I have to take it slow. So it's still going to take at least a few more weeks, possibly longer, just to do all of this right, because I personally don't want to jump the gun and just ignore this stuff here and move on regardless, and then realize, oh, that actually is a really big deal. That actually should be super far away and should take a long time to get there. Now, I want to make sure that it's right, just so that we can get into a rough timeline, which, by the way, for just so that you all know, my assumption is that Victory's life ends at the very end of 2410, and that Age of Discovery and Mirror Discovery start in 2411. Okay, just to make the timeline work, at least right now in my own canonical storyline that I've made for my rough draft, it only works if I use 2 years to go through all the stuff we've done inside the game. If we try to do a year and a half, a little more than a year, it doesn't work. So that's the thing right now. Once this is fully figured out, it might only take another 1 to 2 evenings to actually make some stuff and then go on and start making videos for you all talking about the Star Trek Online lore. Just for reference for you all, it took me about an evening to make this video, so if that's an indication for you all as to how long these videos take, that's about it for you all. So yeah, that's stuff for there. Let's get into the real stuff in this video. For biases and assumptions, I'm assuming in this video and the next one that I'll talk about captain traits, that we're only going to be using the racial traits included in this list. This will include bridge officer traits. In the next video, I'll only refer to captain racial traits. It was going to be way too big if I also included every single ground and space trait that's ever been given out, or that's earnable, or that that would have been way too big. I won't be covering those there. I might do a third video to talk about those later, but for now, I feel this is going to be sufficient. For my own biases, I'm a tank and support player. Tanky and supporty traits will be higher. DPS traits could be lower than what you might expect. In general, for bridge officers, though, if it's enhancing kit stuff or base stats, it's going to probably be higher than what you expect. If it's relying upon positional stuff and weapon dependency, it's going to be probably quite a bit lower, especially if it's around the expose and exploit mechanic, just because bridge officers probably won't be able to use those correctly. So there's my biases for that. In the whole process in this video, the tier list is going to be from A to F. A will get 5 points, B4, C3, D will get 2, and F will get 1. And that's how I'll be assigning things for like each different trait inside the game. And for whenever I look at the rough strength of composite for different bridge officers, since bridge officers have 4 traits, they have a potential to have 20 points in total from those 4 traits. So that's how I'll be ranking those at the very tail end of this video. For trait comparisons themselves, that's pretty similar there too. For this video list, it's just going to be 2 different lists for bridge officers, one for ground and one for space. In a week or 2, I don't know, whenever I feel like it, I'll bring out the second part of this video that'll be for captains, in which it'll just be a progressive video going from the worst captain races to the best. And that'll make a little bit more sense in that video. So yeah, in terms of the traits themselves, there's over 60 ground traits and over 20 space traits inside the game. Alongside that, there are 29 playable races in the game. Alongside that, there's technically an extra one there just because Orion males and Orion females, technically their traits work differently, and then their base stuff that they have inherent as part of their race is different. So there's technically 30 different playable races when it comes to the actual stats inside of the game. So that's also why that one has to be in a separate video, because we're already going to be talking about over 80 traits in this video alone for bridge officers. So trying to stick on talking about the captain play races on top of that would be a little bit too much for one video. But these are all the categories that I came up with for the different traits for each one. This is in order of how I personally value them, from best to worst for each one here. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. First off with bridge officer ground traits, along with all the bugginess that might cause and happen inside of them. This is the A tier ones first, and with all these ones will be a category and then the traits for each one inside of those relative categories. The self-res one obviously is self-explanatory, but we also have some things that will affect or will make using kit abilities easier. Along with damage, my bonuses, regeneration, and resistance, and we'll use some other ones later on too. But when it comes to the 2 different traits in the game that allow you to get back up from being defeated, the Voth one is so much better because first off, it's on a 90-second cooldown or a minute and a half, versus this one, which Reboot 2 and Reboot 3 are both every 10 minutes. And this self-res heals him completely. It brings up to 100% health. Reboot 2, which is on 2 of the 3 Android bridge officers, only brings him or her back up to 50%. Reboot 3 from the fleet version brings him or her up to 75%. And again, this is only 10 minutes instead of 90 seconds, so this one objectively is better. Keep in mind also the Android has a lot more resistances, so it's going to take more work for the Android to go down. So it kind of still balances out in the end. When it comes to stuff from kit abilities, creativity is still the best one for this because it's extremely easy to get for a lot of bridge officers, and it helps everything. It helps damage, it helps healing, helps everything for all of your kit abilities. And since the AI in Star Trek Online is really dumb when it comes to your weapons, creative is the most important trait to have for your captain. If you have creative, your captain is just going to be better at everything that they actually do. That actually is going to be helping your playthrough throughout the game. It's not completely needed to have for you as a captain. You have a lot of other things as captain you can put on your character to increase kit performance, but for your bridge officers, creative is one of the best traits they have. Flux is from the Krenan bridge officers from the Fleet Science Lab. It has power. It increases power recharge speed, or an easy way to put it is it basically lowers the cooldowns of your bridge officer abilities. So combine these 2 together, you'll be able to spam stuff off more, especially if you're going to be especially for your science healer bridge officers. Creative plus Flux is actually really strong. The problem though is when I was testing this to see if that was actually the case, I mean the S2 wiki isn't always reliable. I decided to buy 6 Krenan bridge officers back to back to see if that's week was true and that the Krenim were set in having a certain set of 4 bridge officer abilities, which one was supposed to was superior creativity. That's not the case, guys. It's very random as to what bridge officer abilities that you get from the Krenim, like bridge officer vendor. If your RNG is good and you can manage to get Flux plus superior creative as one of your ground abilities that you're able to get from it, it's gonna be the best bridge option in the game for healing. Otherwise, you're only gonna have Flux plus 2 other ground things, and it's not gonna be as strong. Just gonna throw that out there for you all. The other thing that's good for ground kit things is something called superior. It's called Stasis Specialist. This is exclusive to Romulan bridge officers. There's also the Liberated Borg Romulan science officer from the Lobi store that also has Stasis Specialist. That one doesn't have creative with it though, so there is that, unfortunately. Varel as well from just the regular playthrough of Romulan Captains also gets Stasis Specialist. In my example thing of bridge officers, one of my officers does have Stasis Specialist, just because it is very strong. It adds slow, root, and hold strength to bridge officer abilities that do that. And there are a few science abilities that do that. So if you have creative plus Stasis Specialist, it's a very strong combination. Telekinetic is just a knockback that allows you to more easily have different kit abilities go off. That's why I have it here. It technically could go much lower into B or C tier, most definitely. It's just my personal preference of how it actually performs inside the game. Keep in mind though, the remake one bugs out quite a bit inside the game, so just keep that in mind. Another really strong one in the game is something called Veteran. This was actually the big thing that a lot of your subscription people in the game got whenever this game went to free to play, is that they got some vouchers that they could go to a bridge officer vendor on ESD or Kronos for City, and they could claim a bridge officer that had Veteran for ground as well as Space Warfare Specialist for space. Veteran is really strong because, even though, Veteran first off is a team buff, so having this gives you stats for everyone on your entire team, which is really nice. Even though the damage resistance rating is meh, what's really important is that it gives you passive dodge chance. You don't need to be crouching, you don't need to be rolling, you don't need to have a specific armor or set bonus on your characters. This just adds dodge chance to your entire team, which is huge. With the DS9 lockbox, they added 4 different bridge officers that have the Veteran trait on them. Now, all the bridge officers off of the DS9 lockbox can be used by all captains. Just to prove that, I have Saris Minna right here, the one that I feel is the best one of all of them. As you can see here, I claimed her by KDF captain just to prove it, and she can be used just fine. It was a little bit buggy at first because I didn't have a slot, and it got buggy, and I had to ask Cryptic for some support around it. But your KDF captains can use all the holographic bridge officers, even if they look like they should be a Federation only thing. Just gonna throw that out there. Veteran is extremely strong. In my opinion, you should make room for it on your build. Whether you're a Romulan captain and you still use DevX, or you're a non-Romulan captain and you use like Saris Minna or Kurlan. Because the other 2 ones are also tactical, but they aren't as strong as Saris. But anyway, the other thing I thought was still to put here is Feline Instincts. Most of this sucks, but you have some passive dodge chance, which I really cut in half here, so it's not much. It's still something, and because there's no other really great options for dodge chance in the game outside of putting stuff on your captains or bridge officers, I felt it was worth it to put it here. You definitely could put this much lower in this tier list for your own personal tiers for ground stuff. I thought that was still important to put this here, just because I felt that it was important. So yeah, next stuff here, Borg Nanites and Pig-Headed are both pretty good too. The reason why Borg Nanites is really strong, you know, his health regen is nice. The reason why it's here is because you also get shield generation as well. I'm not aware of any other traits inside the game that for bridge officers that also gives you shield regeneration. This seems to be very unique to the Borg, and it's also one of the reasons why, if you wanted a theme build for ground, having a full ground team of Borg is actually pretty viable because of this shield regeneration here. But when it comes to damage, the one that I like the best is Pig-Headed from Tellarites. That's why Tellarites is actually one of the, if you're a first captain, you might want to actually consider using. Even though you have some resistances here, which is, you know, it's up to you whether you like them or not, you additionally get a 50% chance whenever you're critically hit to have an additional 20% all damage like enhancement to everything that you do. Weapons, kit modules, everything. At the budget end, if you do normal stuff like the Andorians, like Romulan Bridge Officers, probably can be better. Once you get to the more difficult stuff in the game, this is just better. Okay, in my experience, this is just better. So just point that out. I really like this trait because at like advanced and elite difficulty, enemies crit very frequently on the ground. So be able to get a damage bonus from the enemies hurting you pretty badly is nice. And then we have our two big resistance abilities here. Android and Photonic Lifeform are both pretty nice. They each have their own sources to get them. They have a lot of resistances to them. So Android have a lot more resistance, but these guys just have a flat out immunity to a couple of things. That when they initially released Android, they just had a lot of 200s in here because they put in 200 instead of full immunity. Technically, if this was made today, they would put immunity to radiation, toxic, psionic, and confusion instead of 200. Nowadays, you can actually they've actually been able to adjust the program to have immunities to things, so they have that now. And now we get to B tier. Here's some more traits in here that I think are good, but they aren't as good as the stuff in A tier. We have another team-wide bonus in here, a couple more regeneration and confused stun stuff here, as well as some more things that enhance basically all types of damage, and then some more other resistances because I'm a tank captain and I like resistances inside the game. So these two guys here are both regeneration type things. Empathetic is from the Basel Bridge Officer. Even though this looks low, it's only a 5% health regeneration. If you factor in that normally these things are only for yourself, if you put all that health regeneration on just one Bridge Officer, it would equate to 25% health regeneration, which outpaces everything else for health regen inside the game. So this is a very good trait. It's just that, you know, you need to be in a group of 5 in order for it to be super effective. So Basal Bridge Officers are pretty nice because of this. If you want to be a Betazoid captain, it also is a decent viability option as well. It's that it's a bonus that helps everyone, not just you. So you're not going to necessarily look as great being a Betazoid officer, but your team's going to slightly feel it throughout a like PvE run. Spirit Walk is a really nice clicky heal ability available to Regilians. I don't feel it's worth it to have for your Regilian captains per se, and I'll get to more of that in the next video for this series. But it's an activatable for it's a lot of instant healing, along with some additional hit points for a little bit for 6 seconds, while you have a lot of damage resistance. So it's a nice clicky ability for your bridge officers. But that's just me. For some more passive regeneration, we have Spiritual and Hypermetabolism. Spiritual is a bit better because you get a bonus to heals against yourself, just passively. It's exclusive to Bajorans. To Trills, you got Hypermetabolism. There's also a superior hypermetabolism from the Delta Rising Big Pack for a specific Trill engineer, but that's not going to be available to most people. That's also a solid bridge officer as well. But alongside that health regen, you also got some radiation and toxic resist. That is kind of nice because there's not a lot of great sources for radiation and toxic resist, and especially if you're fighting some bugs in the Delta Quadrant, it's nice to have some of those resistances in the game. When it comes to these traits here for Confuse and Stun, Seduce is a pretty powerful ability. Orion females try to seduce some really weird things and it doesn't work. Like there was a couple times when I was playing on a map and I saw an Orion female trying to seduce a turret, and I was like, really? Of course it didn't do anything, but it wasted the seduce effect for its 2-minute recharge on a turret that did nothing. But outside of against engineers, this is a pretty decent trait inside the game. Pacification is a bit better. It's only on Basoid Bridge officers, and it's an extremely rare trait because, at least to my understanding, only the basic and superior version of this trait is available. It's not available at the regular version, and it's only available at basic and superior version. So it's first of all really hard to get for Basoid Bridge officers, and then when you do find it on the exchange, it's in the millions. So I'm not sure if it's just because a lot of people think that Basoid Bridge officer is a pretty good one, or if they just value the spirit pacification really highly. I'm not sure. It's still a decent ability, mind you. It's a very good ability. I'm not sure if it's as good as people feel like that it is, but it's definitely a good ability. The Cryonic Visor Beam, it's from the Marine Bridge officer. It's basically just a ranged stun ability. Is what it comes down to. Ranged stunish ability. It's a hole instead of a stun technically, but pretty similar. I'm not sure if they'll be doing the event again to get the Marine officer, just because if they're going to do the event again, they'd have to promote the 2800 arc again, and I feel like they're almost kind of like trying to push that to the side at this point inside Star Trek Online, because if you're playing a 2800 arc, you see old DS9, and they want you to see new DS9 instead. But yeah, that might just be me. For the next ability, Fury, this is a really strong ability, especially for budget end for ground stuff, especially at your Elfling, because Fury gives your bridge officer, or if you're an Andorian, increased damage as your health gets lower. Now, for high-end stuff, this is not quite as valuable, but for probably most of you, this is something that's probably going to be valuable to you. And this bonus, as I tested, it's for all damage, not just weapons, so it is very good and definitely deserving to be in B tier on this list. My other two ones here, ones that are basically damage that doesn't require lower health, is Aggressive and Vicious. This bridge officer is not very good, honestly, but this one trait is basically just a better version of and stacking version of what Aggressive is. They both have bonus all damage, and this one gets additional crit D for it. This one just has threat generation alongside it. There are some bridge officers in which you're forced to have aggression on them, so it's still nice to have. It's not needed though. Just a nice little perk to have alongside whatever you're really wanting on your bridge officer. Some pretty good standout and standard, very good resistances that I think basically everyone says that are really good is Peak Health and Acute Senses. Peak Health gives you more maximum HP, and HP is a linear scaling resistance, so there's no problem with that. Acute Senses is really good because it gives you resistance to flanking damage, which, since a lot of your bridge officers have really bad AI, as I've said before, they might do very stupid positioning and get flanked. Pretty often, actually. So, being able to give them additional resistance to flanking so that whenever they do stupid stuff that it's harder for them to die is never a bad thing. Logical and Mental Discipline. they're basically the exact same thing. It's just that Metal Discipline is just a weaker version of Logical. Logical is only for Vulcan Bridge officers. It gives you resistance to Psionic, Confuse, and Placate. Now, you can get Psionic a little bit fairly easily through the Undine reputation and through the first mission of the Spectre's arc. However, the Spectre's arc and the 100 arc have issues a lot of times with trying to repeat missions nowadays, and so getting that shield that has Psionic damage resistance on it, I'd say get the other clicky console for space instead first, and then if you're able to replay mission, then play it again and get the Psionic damage resistance shield that I mentioned in the very first video of this channel. Mental Discipline is a decent one too. It still gives you those types of things as well. Keep in mind, not a lot of enemies in the game currently do these types of damage. Hopefully that changes so that you know all different types of damage resistance feel nice to have. Right now, these aren't as valued for players just because there's not as many sources of them inside the game. Seductive for Orion females is a very similar thing. It's just that you also get a little bit of threat duration reduction alongside those additional passive Qs and play resist stuff for it. Stubborn has play resistance, but a little bit of hold and slow as well. Stubborn is a pretty big staple trait for PvP because there is a lot of silly placates and stuns and those types of things at PvP for ground. I've never been good at ground because I've never been great at understanding how to really counter certain things. I know that a lot of people use Sphere Stubborn or something similar. For like there's a couple different races that they can use something else instead of Stubborn to escape hold slows and placates and those types of things. But Stubborn is a standard one for most of other captains and bridge officers inside the game. And now we get to C tier, where a lot of you will probably say that some of these really should be the higher tier if you're just a flat-out DPS captain. Now, like for instance, if I was a Romley captain, Soldier and Plasma Weapon Specialist are great traits. It's just that, again, bridge officers are very bad with their AI to use their weapons properly. So, and they don't a lot of times they don't use them constantly. Like they'll fire and think and fire again instead of fire. So these are good, but not as great as they could be. So that's why stuff affecting kit models is better. Teamwork is the same problem, just because it's really hard to capitalize on your bridge officers to use exploit damage. A lot of times in ground combat, you're able just to blow through enemies really quickly before them being exposed even really is a big difference. Alongside that, you have to use, a lot of times you'll need to use different types of weapons for a couple to expose, a couple to exploit. Nowadays, because of how good the damage is anyway, this isn't a mechanic you really need to worry about. In my builds on league content for ground, I'm able to cruise through it no problem without even worrying about exploit damage. So that's just me. Pacifist, big thing is threat duration reduction. I don't feel like that's really needed at this point inside of Star Trek Online to have that, but if you really like ANR bridge officers, you're going to be stuck with this trait anyway. Nerve Pinch and Neuroblast are a couple of our first versions of melee stuns. Nerve Pinch is basically the strongest one in the game. Neuroblast gives you a very strong run speed reduction to enemies. Neuroblast is also something that your liberated Borg captains can also have too. And it's pretty powerful. Okay, it's a nice ability. Of course, you have to be in a melee to use it, but if you're a melee, you know, might as well use it if you can. Another alternative to the Vulcan Pinch is a Mind Meld. I don't know why they did it this way, but Mind Meld is actually able to affect several enemies if they're all in melee range. That's kind of how they made it so that Mind Meld actually could be in the game. I don't feel like Mind Meld should be an offensive ability in the game, or if it's offensive ability, it's something that's kind of like a little bit of out of combat. But it's there regardless. It's not a very common trait at all to have for bridge officers, so, and whenever you do find it on the exchange, it's pretty expensive. So If you really want it, feel free to pay for a lot of it, or have RNG for getting a Vulcan Bridge Officer requisition give you this for you. Fire Organic Sedative is from the Voth Science Officer. You wouldn't really pick the Voth Science Officer for this, but it's a nice stun or run speed reduction if they happen to break out of the stun. Warrior and Soldier are both pretty similar when it comes to damage. It's only if you have to have Superior Soldier, is Soldier going to be better than Warrior, just because you have an additional 2.5% damage alongside the crit severity that Warrior automatically has. Otherwise, Warrior is going to be better than this one because it'll have the 15% crit severity along with 5% energy damage, and the fact that all Klingon bridge officers have Warrior as one of their bridge officer abilities. So, and you have to work to try to find Soldier on other bridge officers out there. This list definitely is not inclusive of all of them. These are just a couple of the first ones that came to mind for me when I thought of Soldier. For the next ones, Engineered Soldier is basically just a combination of the Lucky trait and a slightly nerfed version of Soldier. It's also why Lucky is not in C tier, just because Engineered Soldier has the Lucky trait already built into its trait here. Only Gemini Vanguards can have this trait, as well as Gemini Vanguard captains. So this is still pretty nice. You get the Lucky trait plus some additional damage too. Possible Weapon Specialist is a nice one for Romulan captains and Romulan bridge officers. It gives you additional plasma energy damage, and so especially if you have a plasma officer with the Soldier trait, they can do a lot of damage with ranged weapons. Still not as, in my opinion, not as great as if you had some kit stuff that enhanced kit things, but it's still decent too. Mental Burst and Cold Dwelling, they're more up here just because they're not as bad as DNF tier stuff. The Marine Bridge Officer one here, it could be a little bit higher on this list. If this ability was like the Reman Captain ability that also heals you, then it would be much higher, like in B tier probably, because it just does damage and knocks them up a little bit. I feel like this is about as good for where it is on this list. Cold Dwelling, this is situationally good. If you're against the Breen, this is very good. If you're not against the Breen, it probably is just a wasted trait for you. But in those situations, it's a decent trait. Natural immunity seems to be on a lot of bridge officers actually, and in the passive racial stuff of a lot of captains in the game. I don't know why, but it seems to be. So yeah, natural immunity gives you additional radiation and toxic resist. Toxic resist is nice. I mean, even a lot of my captains, when I'm running the bug hunt mission, I'll frequently slot the toxic resist trait from the surface tension mission in one of my ground trees just for some extra toxic resist, just so that I don't have to worry about it too much when I'm fighting all of the bugs. But hey, there are a lot of bridge officer traits, and if you choose a captain with one of the racial traits for natural immunities in there, they don't necessarily have to worry about that too much. Sure-footed is a lot better than it looks, just because you get root and knockback resistance, which is really it's really nice. Just because if you happen to have a bridge officer ability that has a little bit of a charge up time for it, sure-footed helps to make sure that they get the ability off. Because otherwise, they could be constantly like interrupted, and then it's hard to get their abilities off. There are also abilities that like instantly go off too, so it's only if you're going to be using those specific abilities is there going to be that worry. Now for D tier, these are things that can benefit you, but it's much harder to use and actually have a case to constantly be able to use these throughout a lot of your time in Star Trek Online. First one, we'll deal with the two cloaking types of abilities inside the game. We have Shroud for Gemini Vanguard officers, which it's a ground self-cloak. A lot of your bridge officers are really stupid about using their cloak properly to be able to capitalize on doing damage. A lot of them will more often use the self-cloak just to survive, which I can see that. But the toughest enemies in the game can still hit them while they're cloaked because of the AoE abilities. So a lot of times it's kind of just nullified. When they happen to use it properly, it's great, but I rarely see that inside Star Trek Online. Blind Sense gives ANR bridge officers immunity to perception debuffs. There's very few enemies that actually do perception debuffs, and cloaking so extremely situational, even more situational than that other stuff in C tier, as to when you would really want to have this trait in your group. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's something that I'm not seeing right for it. Lucky and Dumb Luck. I'll first start off with this one. I don't know why you would choose to have a Packle Bridge officer, because you choose a Packle Bridge officer to have this trait. Is an extra 1% crit chance to lose the 3 types of resistances that are hardest to get in the game really worth it? Maybe in PvE, but that's a pretty steep cost, honestly. If you're playing, like if you're going to choose a race for PvP, for instance, you would not choose Packle. This is a significant drawback for just 1% crit chance. This is not worth it for like if you're going to be on the captain, you're choosing a race, never choose Packle. Well, it's better than a few select races, but not by much. Lucky is one that's available to a vast majority of the bridge officers inside the game, and it's only 1% less crit chance, and you actually have a chance to expose as well. So a little bit better, and you don't have the drawbacks of Dumb Luck. Dumb Luck is just dumb. That's kind of what it just comes down to. Project Image, at budget end, it can be okay. This ability is very similar to a certain ability in the Intel specialization. For one of the Intel abilities for ground officers, it has the same drawback as that one, in which it barely takes any damage before it goes away. It's probably for balance reasons as to why that's the case, but unless you're just a casual player playing normal stuff in the game, this is not a reason to get ANR bridge officers, and unfortunately, this is the big draw to ANR bridge officers. So, yeah. Anyway, Covert is another ability that can be nice. I mean, like it gives you a little bit of bonus damage whenever you're flanking, plus a little bit of exploit damage bonus there too. For a captain, this can be useful. As a bridge officer, this seems to be one of the most common traits that I see on bridge officers on the exchange. I don't know why Cryptic seems to have this trait spawn so much for bridge officers. It's not very, like the stealth, you're not going to have them really use. Exploit damage, oftentimes you can take out bridge often take out enemies before they're exposed to have exploit damage go off. I don't know, it's just me. Telepathic and limited telepathy. The context of here is that it's supposed to be. The limited telepathy is a weaker version of telepathic. However, limited telepathy also has the ability to increase the arc by which you're safe from flanking by an additional 40 degrees, which in my opinion actually makes this stronger than telepathic. I was tempted actually to put this in C tier just because of that part there, but it's not much, honestly. It's still substantial, but it's still not a lot, to be honest. These are the basic ones that I could find right off the top of my head anyway that had these traits. I definitely could be wrong on that. If your bridge officer happens to have this, great. If not, don't sweat over it. Corrosive Blood and Cold Blooded. I was tempted to put these in F tier, But then I was like, you know, it's still toxic resist. Not a lot of great places to get toxic resist in the game. Cold-blooded has fire resist. There's not a lot of places to get fire resist, even though there's not a lot of places that you get fire damage applied to you inside the game either. So I'm still undecided about whether this really should be where it is, but these are definitely very weak traits inside the game. Gorn Bridge Officers, Bullion Bridge Officers are stuck to have these traits. Funny enough, when you look at the passive stats, a Gorn Captain and a Bullion Captain both have both of these traits in their passive stats, but I'll get to that in the next video. It's kind of funny. But anyway, some of the last ones in here. Honorable is another thing that's typically stuck on Klingon Bridge Officers. It's whether or not necessarily the best ones in the game because they're stuck with having an honorable or superior honor for Kagan. In which damage resistance rating, this is basically the damage resistance rating trait in F tier, but you also have threat generation, so at least it's something that's reliably useful. Not super useful, but at least reliably useful for a captain or a bridge officer. Sturdy also has, even though it has physical and kinetic damage, which you're typically going to have a lot of, also has knockback resist, which it's not super common in the game. And now we get to the F tier traits, which I would be surprised if any of y'all were able to convince me that any of these things for bridge officers is actually good. Situationally, as a captain, these can be good. Like if you're doing a physical damage oriented build for a captain, these are actually pretty good. Like for instance, right now for one of my I decided to create a new captain to help with me playing through the whole game again to make it more interesting. As I made her a Terran captain, and she's a Vulcan from the Discovery era because Vulcans have physical strike embedded into their ground trait, and she is a melee captain. She's using the Emperor's sword for everything, and it's fun. But unless you're doing a specific melee build, those ones aren't going to be very good. Bite and Pounce are also abilities that suck pretty bad, or they just aren't very good. Bite, it's something. It's just damage that it does more damage over time. Yes, these both can exploit. You might argue that this could potentially be used if you wanted to do the exploit mechanic for any of your jobs to help with that. I don't agree that these are great options for that. Maybe y'all can tell me in the description if that's, or in the comments if that's the case, or email me on that. Pounce is basically just a trait version of Lunge, even for your two different cats inside the game, which you have to pay Zed in order to use them. It takes a trait slot to have Pounce. So, yeah. Honor the Fallen, the worst regeneration trait in the entire game. It's a completely worthless trait until teammates die around you, and then you get additional damage and health regeneration. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't. I tried theorizing. I cannot find a reason to have Honor the Fallen in your group. It's honestly just a lost trait, honestly, foreground. Resilient, however, if we had the option inside of Star Trek Online to switch out traits with other traits that are available for the race that you have your bridge officer as, I could see Resilient as being very good to have on all of your bridge officers whenever you start the game, so that your damage rating is basically doubled from whatever your armor is, because your armor rating is very, very low. But then as you get better armor, to switch it out with better traits. That could be a good argument there. For a trait that's stuck on a bridge officer the whole time, it's not a trait that I can actually recommend at all to have. Because every armor is going to have, every piece of armor anyway is going to have physical and energy damage resistance on it. And then of course, obviously the physical strength stuff here, I've already said that as well. Reptilian strength is just a slightly better version of strength that's for Gorn. Other than that, these two traits are literally the exact same thing. Varison is just the cat version that has damage with melee attacks instead of dodge chance on it. Technically, the Cation one could be a little bit lower than tier list just because the rest of the traits of the first one are just so bad as well. Okay, we're pretty far into this. Let's try to quickly get through space traits and some examples because it's already been a long time in this video. For A tier and B tier, here's just some stuff really quickly. I don't feel like a lot of these are in very big argument, honestly, in Star Trek Online. These have been pretty established. Most of your DPS people in the game are space, so I think that we'll be able to go straight forward through a lot of these traits pretty quickly. Superior Romulus Operative is the best damage one inside the game. 2% crit chance, 5% crit severity. Cloak return speed, if you're a cloak captain. If not, it's not a problem. Romulan captains can get a full group of 5 Superior Romulan Operatives for their crew. They can also use the Delta Alliance Big Pack to get two of your space officers. Also have the 2 really strong cloaking traits that we'll get to in a bit on this list. Photographic memory is definitely something you should highly consider if you're going to be a PvP captain in space, just because it's the only place you can get accuracy and defense. Well, there's also one other one, but this one gives you actually defense plus damage. So it's for accuracy and defense for a bridge officer, this is the best one inside the game. There's 2 special ones from the Delta Rising Big Pack. If you're a Romulan captain, then you'll just slot in the Romulan and Reman captain from that has Superior Subterfuge and Superior Infiltrator, because Infiltrator increases the duration of your ambush boost whenever you decloak. That's the advantage to cloaking and decloaking. And Subterfuge increases the damage that you get from that ambush damage. So it's a very strong in conjunction if you have a battle cloak build. Otherwise, it's not something you really need. And just if you're a Romulan captain and having 5 Superior Romulan Operatives, either from leveling up or from just find them on the exchange for really cheap, is completely fine. For B tier, an Engineer Soldier is a nice alternative to Superior Romulan Operative if you have access to these and aren't a Romulan captain. Otherwise, not a big deal. There are a couple other options as well. Kantari Ferocity from the colony is also nice as well for DPS builds. Pirate is also nice as well for Klingon captains, as well as all captains from the Hierarchy Science Officer from the Delta Quadrant missions. Efficient used to be a decent one, and it's still decent at budget end. However, because of how easy it is to get lots and lots of power nowadays, this is not as strong, which also means engineers are by virtue of their abilities, also not as strong as well inside the game, for space anyway. Techie and Leadership are both pretty similar. Techie is a little bit better in terms of hull regeneration and also has additional hull healing from its Techie trait. But it's only available on 2 bridge officers in the entire game right now, one of which is locked to the Federation. Nog is from the DS9 lockbox, which means that every faction can be able to access Nog if they really want. Both these officers are engineers, so if you really wanted to have both of them on your ship, you need to have other bridge officers be to not be engineers for stuff like, I don't know. Leadership is a standard one, available from humans as well as Lucari and Kantari bridge officers off of the colony. So if you're a Klingon captain and really want a lot of leadership on your ship, that's the best place to get it. I believe also the Delta Rising Big Pack also has 1 or 2 bridge officers that have the leadership trait in space too. The big thing for this trait though over this one is the subsystem offline resist. If that's a concern for you, leadership is a good option. Otherwise, Techie is going to be better. The thing with leadership is that the Lucari bridge officers also have a trait called Restorative Primaris Specialist. This trait doesn't stack though, so it's only beneficial if you're, for instance, if you're a Federation captain, to only have 1 Lucari bridge officer on your ship, just because this outgoing hull healing is only able to be put on your ship once. But it's still really nice for a lot of your support builds. You can easily have Nog, Montgomery Scott, and a Lucari bridge officer, and have an additional 30% outgoing hull healing to allies, which I think is pretty strong. There might be better ways to do it. That's just me brainstorming of what would be probably good for a support build. For the Crown Bridge Officer itself for space, it's very situational, and it takes a lot of math to figure out whether you want a Crown Bridge Officer on your ship. If you have an Ox Ox to Bat build with cooldowns there? Probably not, because a lot of abilities have max cooldowns on them. They can't go below a certain threshold. However, so basically, like for this officer, it's either it'll help you build a ton, or it'll be completely worthless to your build. So feel free just to look at a lot of the DPS builds out there. If they're using a Crown Bridge Officer, they've probably done the math and figured out that they probably wanted one on their ship. For C and D tier, I don't have F tier, but this is basically F tier here because it doesn't help you in combat at all. Here's the rest of them here. Tactician is from Mukura. It's not great. It's not really great on its own. It's just an extra little bonus thing to add to the leadership trait that she already has. Impatient is just a worse version of the Krenim Officer. So get the Krenim Officer instead of the Zindi Officer if you really want to cooldowns in space. Space Warfare Specialists and Astrophysicists give you additional stats in space, a little bit more sciencey stuff, a little bit more accuracy, defense, and crit chance. Other stuff is better for that. The K-13 officers, the tactical version is just like the Cardassian bridge officer for space, but the Cardassian also has damage. The engineering version gives you impulse and EPS flow. It's not very much, frankly. I think that other stuff is better. The K-13 Android has a superior version basically of the engineering thing here. I can't remember the stats for the science one, but I would imagine it's probably EPG and like drain or control, or draining and control is probably what the two traits are. And then of course our worst trait for space in the entire game is Salvage Specialist. It's from Talaxi Bridge Officer, so it costs a low buy to get, which is already a downside in and of itself. Plus, it has a very low proc chance when enemies are 25% hold to get random R&D materials or salvage. Yeah, this thing is just garbage. Do not get it. Your R&D people inside the game can tell you a lot of better ways to get R&D materials than to get a bunch of Talaxian Bridge Officers. So our last part in this video, try and make this as quick as I can, you guys, is Ground Bridge Officers. We'll start with the ones that you're able to get inside the game. So here's a couple of tactical officers in the game that you start off with all have 3 superior traits on them. Based upon my preferences of how I like bridge officer abilities, our Discovery Federation ones are the exact same officers, so that they have the same score. Our Romulan tactical one also has 10. So makes him a little bit better, slightly in my opinion, but KDF one, even though it has 4 ground, it's not significantly higher because honor and sturdy aren't really that valuable for ground traits. It's still decent though. Ones that are a little bit better for stuff from the game, the Dominion Tactical Officer is a bit better, and the best one by far though is Tarsi from the TOS one, because she gets Fury along with huge senses and superior big health and superior soldier. It's just very, very strong, the combination traits that she actually has. The 2 tactical officers that I would say is better than Tarsi, because that's the one I'm judging here, is going to be the Hollow Lita Bridge Officer, which is a little bit harder to access nowadays, as well as Sarish Mena, which is from the DS9 lockbox. At least on PC, she is really cheap. Well, for strong bridge officers, she's relatively cheap at about 100,000 energy credits, which for endgame stuff, when it's not that hard to get 1 million credits in like 1 or 2 days of just running a couple of random TFOs or something, that's really cheap. Because the total amount of points possible is 20 and she has 19. She has the veteran trait, which is rare inside the game, but she has it, along with Superior Creative, Superior Photonic Life Form, and then Superior Spiritual. I know a lot of you might say Spiritual is bad, but it gives you passive regeneration, because it's superior. It's 15% passive regeneration, plus its bonus healing to self helps to counteract the photonic reduction, photonic passive, in which you normally have a lot of resistances to heals for photonic officers. Superior Spiritual helps to counteract that. So overall, it's a very solid group of traits. I honestly cannot think of any tactical bridge officers that are stronger than her right now. Feel free to let me know if there's any ones that are stronger. In my opinion, she is the strongest, though. When it comes to science officers, here's the 4 that come to mind very easily. Neonet Exil is pretty strong because his self-res, it comes up so frequently. Plus he has superior creativity. These things are kind of okay, but it's really these two that kind of set him apart. Well, the Omega Borg Science has a lot of notability just because he has 4 superior traits. They aren't the best ones, and he doesn't have creativity, so that's the big downside to him. 0178, for an android, a lot of people say that he's the best one in the game for science because he has creativity plus android reboot and superior acute senses. Like, he is basically the lifetime reward android, but he's another bridge officer and he's locked into science, and his flexibility for his looks are very limited. But as long as you're okay with the looks and the stats and are a Federation captain, and are willing to spend like the couple thousand Zen to get the starter pack for the Age of Yesterday thing from the C-Store, it's a very solid trait. It's a very solid trait, or it's a very solid bridge officer. My personal preference is I personally prefer the fleet very rare Romulan science officers here. The male one I like a little bit better because it has superior acute senses. The female version has superior stubborn, which is still in the same category, but I still value acute senses a little bit more. Even though you lose superior subterfuge, the other 3, you're able to get superior creativity along with superior stasis specialist. Basically, for being to have one of your science bridge officers being like a sciencey control type of person with like with things like cold fusion flash, agitation field, those types of things. Creativity plus stasis specialist gives you the most damage and control stuff from those different types of abilities for your bridge officers. But that's just me personally. For engineering officers, outside of the veteran or lifetime reward android, there's not a lot of really ones that stick out to me personally. All the ones I think are decent, they have a space trait alongside them, which kind of devalues them significantly. Devex, for free to play stuff, is definitely the best, in my opinion, the best by far because he gets veteran. If you want the veteran trait, otherwise nowadays you have to get one of the DS9 bridge officers, like Kurland, who also has veteran. So he's actually is a case to have him on your bridge crew. K13 android on the surface looks good because she's an android. However, first off, you lose one of your traits right that because one of them is space. Not to mention the seduction trait, which gives you a couple of resistances to things. The superior android trait actually has complete immunities already of those passive things that seduction would give you resistances to. So the seduction trait is only actually giving you some threat generation reduction to your officer. If you actually are choosing this officer for its stats, you should be choosing the male version of the K13 android. Just gonna throw that out there for you all. The ones that are kind of on par with the Vex, honestly, because he's, in my opinion, one of the best engineers in the game, but he doesn't have creativity. The Hollow Montgomery Scott is pretty nice because he's a photonic life form with superior creativity, which is pretty nice. Kurland has veteran though, so if you really want veteran and you want it to be in the engineering category, he's the only one that's not the Vex or one of those ones that you could claim from back in the day before the change for free to play. If you're one of those people, this is like one of the best ways to get the veteran trait. When it comes to free to play, I honestly feel that the group of bridge officers that you get with Around the Republic are insanely strong. The only one that I didn't like, honestly, of the original 4, you get to replace with the Vex later on. And actually, spoiler alert here, guys, there's actually a Star Trek Online lore reason as to why the Vex joins your crew and Farrell doesn't. And actually, Farrell leaves, by the way. Just as an FYI, I'll get to that in that video a little while away. Tovan's a solid tactical officer. Possible Superior Soldier gives you that for your weapons. Hyven is the only ground Romulan I've been able to find. Even on the exchange, I haven't been able to find any other Romulan ground officers that don't have a space trait. So he has that. So he has creative, along with peak health and cute senses, which by themselves are also good. Plus, for his bonus 4th trait, he has Plasma Weapon Specialist as well. Satura, I don't know how to say that. She has Stasis Specialist, which means that if you're going with my recommendations of having, from my budget traits video, of having the tactical guy who's basically running interference, engineering guy who's doing constructs and stuff, and then a science healer and a science control person. This would be your healer, this would be your control person. So the stuff is already basically built there for you to have that. And then replacing Vero with the Vex is just a flat out upgrade, because you get the veteran trait, which gives you additional dodge chance to you and to all of your other bridge officers, which gives you a lot of extra survival. For my personal opinion, for my personal setup, for what works the best and what will be best and what would work for every single faction inside the game, tactical would be Sarah's Minna. Just the stats there, as I've said before. Spirit Creativity, along with Veteran, Spirit Filling Life Form, really great for resists and bonuses to your entire team. Spirit Spiritual, so that whenever she is getting the heat, the heals on her are better, and actually makes her on par with any other standard bridge officer for the most part. For Engineering, the Lifetime Android is still basically the best one in slot here. I was trying to find an excuse to use something else, but nothing else could really stick out, honestly. For Science, I like Neil and Exel, just because he looks different and cool. If you're a Federation captain, definitely the 0178 Android from the C-Store. It's definitely pretty strong here. But this setup is going to be for every single faction, and was able to everyone. And that one's only able to Federation captains, as well as Discovery and TOS captains. Everyone else can access that bridge option, so Neelan's the better option there for your healer. And obviously for your science interference, as I said, the Fleet Romulan Science Officer with superior creativity and superior stasis specialist is just insanely strong for that, and to deal the most damage with those control science AoE control abilities. For closing thoughts, strong generalist officers to look for if you want some passive generation outside of the board. Bajorans, Trills, and Betazoids for bridge officers are also pretty good. Bajillions also will always have that clicky heal in their traits, so that's pretty nice. Fair Control and Stun, Romans and Remans are the best overall. Orion females are also pretty nice as well if you're wanting Klingon faction-specific stuff. For damage, Andorians are pretty good for budget for Federation. Tellarites are much better because of their pig-headed ability for higher end melees or ground stuff, and Klingons are the go-to one generally for ranged damage for your bridge officers. In the next video that I eventually will get out, whenever the YouTube algorithm basically tells it is starting to punish me for not putting out videos, I'll probably cover another thing talking about the captain races. And I'll break down every single captain race based upon what innate traits are built into each race of every playable captain race inside the game, calculating the worth of those traits based upon the stuff in this video, and then I will rank every single one of those for what are the strongest ground races. The space ones should already be pretty straightforward to you all. That's very simple to figure out. It's going to be the strong ground races that I'm going to be talking about in that video. And of course, as you all know, I'm working hard on the Star Trek Online lore video stuff. That is eventually going to come. It will eventually come. We'll see when it does. Anyway, thank you all so much. Even I haven't been putting out videos the past couple of weeks, for y'all for liking, subscribing, and commenting on other videos. I'm definitely still around. I'm not being, it's not like I've quit putting up fun stuff for YouTube. I'm still working hard on Star Trek Online lore stuff. There have been a couple of notable channels that have even started to look at stuff on my channel, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's about it. If for now, it was a long video. It could have been twice as long. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and see you in a little while.